We're recording this session for bhworks, so there you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first breakout session of the
Sit down now. Okay. Here we go.
Good afternoon. It is a sincere pleasure and joy to be here with all of you on this Wednesday afternoon. Welcome to our first breakout session. Tears of Joy, an MTSS ISD case study using bhworks software. I am your MC for today's exciting breakout session. Scott Hutchins, joined by several wonderful folks, Jennifer Van Tol, Lindsay Garrow, and Michelle Hutchison, who are going to do a phenomenal presentation for you. Welcome, sit back, enjoy your flight, and thank you for coming.
All right, so quickly, Lindsay's going to go over a quick bhworks overview. Michelle's going to do just a quick, most of you saw the bigger version, but she's going to do a quick message around this topic of MTSS. And then, of course, I'll go into what we're doing in my neck of the woods.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lindsay Garrow. I am the Client Services Project Manager with bhworks. I know pretty much everybody in this room. There's a couple of unfamiliar faces. So you're going to hear a lot about what I've talked about in previous sessions. So if you are not currently familiar with the bhworks platform, it is a behavioral and mental health software platform. We are in 45 out of the 56 ISDs currently. And as Scott referenced in the earlier session, we have 2 more ISDs that we are partnering with for fall. So we've done a lot of work in the last 4 years that we're super proud of. So if you, again, are not familiar with our platform, you can use our system to be able to log referrals, capture informed consent via an electronic module. You can document plans of care in our system. You're able to document service notes within our platform. We're integrated with several different billing platforms across the state of Michigan for that Medicaid reimbursement. And we really try to promote best practice across the state and Medicaid compliance. We do house somewhere over 100 different electronic screening and assessment tools. And if you've worked with us before, you know that this number is constantly growing. So if you're coming to us and saying, hey, we really have a need, can you help us with this form? You know, this is what we're trying to build and expand. So we're super proud of the work that we are doing. We've continued to build out the system to support MTSS workflows, crisis workflows. We've talked a lot about, we have a nursing module that we're very excited to be able to release to public later this year. So that is something where we're really partnering with school nurses across the state so that you're able to also log that documentation within our system. And then I just like to add, I think one of the best things about partnering with us is not only do we have a fabulous platform, but we have a really awesome group of staff in our company. We all care so much about students and the well-being across Michigan. We care so much about your success, and we genuinely want to partner with you to make you guys successful and feel supported as well. So if you guys have any questions, please reach out. There is going to be a link to the website link to this MTSS guide. So Michelle, in addition to some others, put together this work group where they really looked into that MTSS framework and what is considered best practice. And they published this really beautiful article, so if you guys have a chance later to click on it, this is a great resource. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer and Michelle to go through the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you. This is really Jennifer's presentation and her baby today, so I'm just going to speak very quickly and then pass the presentation on to her, which I love the title, by the way, Tears of Joy, because we're really proud of the work, and yet we want to continue to expand and begin to dig into the conversation of what services look like in Michigan at all tiered levels. Like, what are the possibilities, right? What's already happening? How do we bring together some collaboration from district to district or ISD to ISD, but also allow for that individuality of what's being provided to your students in your area. And I'm excited to share in that version 2.0 that Scott and I referenced a lot today, that we are at the state level starting to build out teams of collaboration. So we're inviting you in. If you have areas of interest, please reach out to us. Around, like, these teams will be developed as work groups or communities of practice around different topical areas to help strengthen the work that's happening. And MTSS Structures is one team that we are building to take a really good focus lens into and say, like, what can this really look like? What can services really look like if they're tiered well, if we're tracking data well, if we have smooth transition from beginning to end of services, from general education to that transition into special education services if necessary. And so we want those of you who are interested in the topic of pairing behavioral health and tiered structures to be a part of that work group, and also to help us build out this very robust system. But with that said, you know, we've identified Jennifer as one of the leads in our state for this work, and so I'm really excited to hear from her expertise today. So truly, I'm going to pass it on to you now.
Okay. So first, a lot of us who have been in this school a lot of years, and I look across the crowd and see a lot of faces I'm familiar with, but why are you here to hear about Tears of Joy? And then what do you already know about the pyramid, okay? So I'm gonna throw it up, just a basic one, and tell me, what do you already know? Just some shout outs. What do you already know about that triangle?
Tier 1 never goes away.
Love it. Okay, good. School-wide, never goes away. All students. Okay, we'll start with that. So yeah, we're really wanting to build that base. Now, when I came into the role way back at the beginning of this whole 31N thing, and we were doing Google Form Plan of Cares and keeping our own notes in some separate system, not even knowing where we were gonna put it to bill Medicaid at the time. We were just keeping it with the whole, if you didn't write it down, it's not being done kind of thing, keeping our own. I really came in with that universal lens. Let's see what we can build in our districts. So as a mental health provider myself, and one of the first BCBAs actually in that role, I was super excited. I actually was super nervous at first, like, am I sure this is okay? What is the Z code anyway? Like, can't anybody be diagnosed with stress unspecified? Yup, go see kids, Jen. Okay, great. And so staying within my scope of practice and doing some of that work was really fun to say, okay, I know how to go see kids, but also what else are we doing? How are we training the teachers? How are we getting administrative buy-in in what we're doing? And so I work for a really good supervisor who allows me to wear my rose-colored glasses everywhere I go. And so I had this vision and we grew it. We started with 2. They had 1 position posted. She hired me and a brand new grad. I had tons of experience in the schools, a brand new grad. We went along for the ride and now we're at 12. And then last year I switched into the coordinator role. And I was super happy with the title, Whole Child Systems Coordinator, because it really felt like full circle in my career, because I started my career as an occupational therapist. So looking at whole child was like something I always did anyways. So it felt really good to kind of move into this role. So the title, that whole joy piece, I started journaling in January, way before this, and this is like my word of the year, joy. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. So joy is a feeling of great pleasure and happiness, and I keep saying we have to bring joy into this work anyways. We have to keep one thing similar to what Michelle was saying about the neurology. The things I'm saying in my ISD is we have to continue to do the good. We continue to do the good for kids, and if something blocks us and we feel like we can't do the good that way, we're just gonna go find another way to go do the good. So we're gonna just keep doing the good. Like, let's not talk about all these barriers, let's just keep our forward momentum. So to start with, I want you to close your eyes and picture one thing personally that brings you joy. Could be a place, could be a person, could be an experience. Okay, when you're ready. Now I want you to name one thing about student data that brings you joy. Don't laugh, Tanya. One thing about student data that brings you joy. Anybody? You can see the impact. Thank you. So for me, finding that pattern in the data, the messier the better. Like, bring me it, let me look at it. It brings me joy. So when I hopped out of being a provider and I got access to all these beautiful reports in bhworks, oh, did I have fun. Did I have fun? I was like, look at the colors, look at this, look, I can do this. And then they just keep adding more. So I'm hoping to share with you along my journey of helping my providers who a lot of them came from CMH and outside provider world, had no idea what MTSS was. And then bringing them in and saying, okay, here's how we're gonna do this. Keep doing what you're doing on seeing kids, but there's this bigger picture we have to continue to work ourselves through. And that all means all came up, right? That we're not only collecting this data, but what are we doing with it to make decisions in our buildings and in our districts and in our locals. And so I'm hoping that you'll see kind of how we kind of took this on. So the thing that we did with our, you've seen the percent, if you know about the triangle at all, you know about the percentages. But the one thing that we really looked at is like, what are those core instructions? What are we doing to build mental health into what we're already doing? Like, one of the big things that I was really strong about is, and even if it took me spending more time in a classroom or in a building or going to the board meeting in the night and saying, oh, I know you're hearing the word SEL, but let me tell you, what we're trying to teach your kids is that it's not okay to call Mrs. So-and-so a bleep and walk out of the room. But what we are trying to teach is they know how to ask for a break and leave the room when they're upset. Like, that's okay. That's okay behavior. We all do it every day at work. Frustrated about something, we know how to appropriately check out, go do something, and re-enter. That's the life skill we're trying to teach. And so showing up and teaching that in the classroom is not something new. Teachers have been doing that for years. We're just being more intentional about it. And now we're even saying, how are we collecting data around it? So one of the things that we did early on was building that interconnected systems framework is try to lay out whose role and responsibility it is, but build partnerships. So I remember one of the first staff meetings that I started presenting to with across teachers. I said, do you care if I ask them if they want additional training on suicide prevention? And not only just suicide prevention with the Safe Talk was the model we were using, but if any of them wanted to be trained on how to actually do an intervention. And the principal was like, I'm like, how do you want me to go about it? And he said, just put a notepad out, and after the meeting, they can sign up. We had 8 teachers sign up for the training. Eight teachers in middle and high school that said, yes, I want to go to a 2-day training to learn this. We ended up with 5. 5 ended up going due to multiple other reasons. But 4 out of that 5, they did it on a Thursday, Friday. Monday, they told me, Jen, I used the strategies I learned day 1 back in the classroom. So that was like that powerful message, like, this is okay. We are building this forward. And so we were the CARES team, right? It was caring about RESTAs, that was the school at the time, emotional supports. We even had a little cutesy acronym. But we started saying, okay, whose role and responsible? Is it just the mental health providers to do this work? No. And so teachers were getting buy-in, and administration was seeing them step up and do those things to build that support across the district. And so it wasn't just one more thing, it became part of the thing that school did. And so it just really felt good. If you want more training on the interconnected systems framework or any of the building the social emotional behavioral health in, the MTSS trainings are really good. They have tons of them throughout the year, including the virtual summit that's coming up in June 17th, where they're saying, okay, how are we building this in? Is not that one more thing. But it just becomes part of that embedded school-wide positive behavior system of building a safe and trauma-informed culture in our school. So just as a little plug there, I got a lot of the tools that I use from that resource. So this is kind of early on how we started functioning as an ISD, both with what kind of services are we going to provide at each of those tiers, but also what do we expect. And so one of the things that we were really clear on our MOUs was we were going to do universal screening. Like right from the get, I don't know if you remember, but I started that first year back from COVID, and the governor had released the, hey, you need to do some kind of screening. We were all doing all the virtual, and Trails was still with U of M, and they released this, hey, here's a good screening tool, and we all got trained in it. Well, all at that time was 2 of us. And we were like, let's start doing this. So it was just right in our MOU right from the beginning that you would be doing this if you were going to have a mental health provider in your district. And so we created some things around that. And one of the things that we created was the universal opt-out form, because we wanted to let parents know what we were doing in their districts and that we were building these systems that wasn't just about 31N. It was about additional social, emotional, behavioral health, and including some supports that maybe a teacher was going to have another teacher cover their room while they did some type of intervention if needed, whatever it was. But we have additional supports we're building in. Here's what they are, and we list them out. And then, do you want your child to be a part of that? And when it's put that way, most parents are like, of course I do. Of course we do have some parents opt out. That gives them that opportunity. But then we said, hey, there might be additional supports like some small groups. We might be running some Trails CBT around, anxiety or depression or whatever else it might be. Teaching specific skills in groups. And so with that, we're going to let you know that you're going to need additional, your child's going to need additional support. But what we thought around it was, and what I had been preaching for years in the world of behavior across the state is, hey, we always have that room that kids go to get extra reading intervention. Why don't we have that room for teaching extra behavior intervention? So when I saw, little side note, when my position was first posted, BCBA wasn't even listed on it. And I called and said, hey, I just read this job description. Do you know I could do that job as a BCBA? And they were like, oh, you're on the staff pool list. Yeah, apply. We'll revise it. And they were like, we didn't put it on there because we didn't think we'd find any. And I'm like, well, I'm interested. So here we are, so many years later. And so, yes, doing that behavior intervention becomes part of what all kids can access, additional behavior skills, right, in a smaller group setting. And then, of course, if you get to the point where you're putting somebody on your caseload, we're going to have to do a consent to treat and move forward with that way. You went through a lot of that training. I'm not going to go into it all. But this is just kind of the breakdown of what we think of as universal prevention, like building in whatever that curriculum is that district uses. I try to stay up on a lot of them, and so I list some here in a minute. But that universal screening always was going to be included, and then also school-wide awareness, that we were going to talk about it in your school. We were going to talk about what that 31N or caring for students provider was what I went by at first because it was less scary. Like, hey, I'm the caring for students provider. Guess what I do? I care for students. And then we didn't have to say, hey, she's a social worker, you're this, that. It was easier at the beginning. Now everybody knows the school mental health support specialist is like the go-to in their building. So the thing is we started building curriculum in is we started talking to teachers on, hey, did you realize that those 3 most important parts of learning that attention, the focus and memory, that all comes from your emotional state, not a cognitive state. So when you say pay attention, try harder, if they're not at an emotional state, you're not gonna get that attention and try harder. So once you started talking to teachers in language that they were like, oh, yeah, I've seen that, then they're willing to say, okay, tell me more. And that's all we wanted was the tell me more. And so as we started moving forward with teaching different social, emotional, behavioral health curriculum, I've been involved with many parts and sometimes all of them in a district. But these are just some. One of the early ones in the one elementary was zones of regulation, and my OT background in me loved it. I also, the new BCBA hat in me, there's a lot of pairing and association kids do to words. So like, oh, you look mad. No, I'm not mad. Okay, mad means a punishment's coming, so let's not use that word for you. You look like you're in the red zone. And then kids were like, yeah, I am in the red zone. Well, here's what we can do. Let's try these tools, right? So whatever curriculum you're using, we just would encourage, let's look at it. Let's see what is a good fit for you based on what you've currently done, what you've already done. Where do you want to go in your district? And then the other thing we identified early on is that piece that was discussed earlier too, that the neuro level of where teachers were at post-COVID, we're not in a healthy place either. And so our first year, we put tons of training and PD and support into, and got really creative. We used the building, in my particular district, we used the Building Healthy Schools funding through the HSAT, if you guys are familiar with that, for teacher wellness, and we got really creative on the things we did to try to build some fun in and build relationships amongst teachers. We did a lot of training on wellness for teachers, and so that was really important to do as that baseline. And to continue doing and continue talking about. For the school-wide awareness, I ran into, when I was in the U of M Depression Center using that screener, the P2P program through U of M, and I called her, Lizelle, if you need her contact, let me know, and I said, Lizelle, I see all this stuff on here, and there's like pre and post surveys and blah, 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 and she's like, well, there was a cost like to join them, but she's like, I'll just send you all my stuff. You can use whatever you want. And of course, me being the data analysis person, I did the pre and post. And what we found in year one is we increased help seeking across the board. We increased awareness of mental health is okay to talk about. We reduced that stigma. And it was really, really powerful. So we kind of kept it going. We kept building that momentum. And so this was you had to create a slogan. This was our slogan. This was the school that I was in, that was their colors. And then we really focused on hope, like hope for our futures, and that stigma hurts and awareness helps. So how can we continue moving that forward? That was year one. And then as we started moving into that peer-to-peer from that awareness campaign, and a few of you know that it didn't take me very long before I was like, Grand Valley has a really neat model around peer-to-peer. It's about building mutual benefit for kids, and it can be ran as an elective class, and you're struggling finding somebody to put somebody during second hour during that elective course. I got an idea, and so we ended up growing it into the Grand Valley State peer-to-peer program. If you want more, you can look it up on the START website. But it really was about helping students realize that helping others is super beneficial. And they were realizing the benefit to themselves as well. Then with universal screening, like I said, we did start out with that trails screener, but we quickly knew we needed to move into something additional. And so we used the data that we had. We used some of the tools that we knew how to select programs. We leveraged some of the 97J funding to move ourselves forward. I was always a huge proponent. I started really looking at our MiFi data and things, and I was a huge proponent, and we have to lift kids' voices. And the number one thing I say to people when I go around talking about this is, if you ask kids how they're doing, they're going to tell you. You don't have to ask a teacher to ask how they're doing. Ask the kids. They're going to tell you. They will. They want to tell you. They want to tell you how they're doing and how you can help them. And when we build them and lift them up, it is amazing the ideas they come up with. And so I was like, we need a universal screener for all students. We had our behavioral health assessment teams. We had the peer-to-peer kids. We had parent involvement. And so we were like, okay, we need to choose a screener. We looked through a lot of different things. We were looking for specifically universal. Like, we wanted K-12. We settled with, we're doing 312, of course, because kindergarten to second grade have a hard time identifying their feelings or identifying some of that. So we're doing 312 across the board. And we were talking about, not only are we looking for how to match kids with additional support, but now that have everybody moving forward with teaching a curriculum, how are we doing on teaching that curriculum? Where are our holes? And so we use the hexagon tool, for those of you that are not familiar. It's a great way to make a decision. And we ran quite a few. We looked at SABRS, we looked at iWellness, we looked at Panorama, and then the SSIS. And it won out Panorama over SSIS. And we moved forward with Panorama. Now, I have to tell you, I am loving it. I'm just going to give you that little piece. I'm not advertising for them. But the one thing that we're really liking about it is easy to read, not just for our providers that can click on red, and then say, ooh, these kids need additional screening. Maybe we'll run these handful of kids through a GAD or a PHQ to kind of see where they're at. But it also allows teachers in a classroom to pull up their class and go, oh, we're really low here. And then it's tied right to a playbook that has intervention from Character Strong, Second Step, all these other different things, all in one platform. And if you're low in this area, it says, here's some to get started with. Do. And you just click and it takes you right to that lesson. So we liked how easy it was to use. So we've been pretty happy with that, and we are going to continue with that into next year on teaching those students to lift their own voices to get the support they need. This is from bhworks. So what I did throughout here is, if I got the data from bhworks, I labeled it as such. So this is our primary referral reasons, and this is a new skill we've been building up in our providers. Because as you can see, other is like the second, and we're like, what does other mean? Like, can we get I think it just became, and I know I was a provider. It's like I don't know, I don't want to think about it, other, right? So now we're saying, hey, we're using this data to make decisions, because like in our one district, we were like, did you realize that trauma and negative life events accounts for all of your referrals practically? You need to do some additional professional development, and we're giving this data, like I make them a one pager back to back at the beginning of the year to give to the district superintendent and the admin team on, look at trauma and negative life events as your primary reasons. You might need to do some more trauma-informed care for your staff. That might be a way to look at it. So we are using the data to help make decisions. So this is how many, for our 31N providers, the referrals from screening. So I love that we can capture that number right from there, that this is how many students this fall we were able to capture from screeners to do something additional. Didn't mean they were on a caseload. It might be they referred out or whatever. As far as universal, that tier 1 support, this is just another thing that I really liked. We don't require all of our providers to use the indirect service recording, but I have a couple that want to use it solely for this. So this pretty picture is not from bhworks, but there's a suggestion if you need one. I downloaded the spreadsheet from bhworks and then made my own. I'm a data analyst, so that's my jam. But we were able to look at, for her 360 indirect service hours, 25% of that was in school-wide PBIS and SEL. So we were able to look at that and say, look, our provider is spending this much time with you outside of seeing her massive caseload. And so that was really helpful with them making decisions moving forward with the MOU for the next year. So when we look at tier 2, we're not just looking at what our providers can do, remember? This is beyond just our mental health providers, but what can other people do? And so we're constantly looking at how are we building this into what we're doing, including attendance. That was a huge thing. Our truancy officer really got on board with, hey, is it okay if I start talking about you guys in truancy meetings? I'm like, that seems important, especially when a lot of the truancy families are saying, my daughter's not coming to school because she has anxiety. Seems like a no-brainer, yeah. And so we started, like, how are we looking at this and analyzing all the data to move ourselves forward? So check-in and check-out has been used both formally, like through a system, as well as informally. But the one thing that I always go to is really you're just teaching staff how to connect with kids. Like, when you saw that umbrella with all those programs, I keep saying, like, bottom line, I don't care what you're doing as long as you're building relationships and teaching skills. Build relationships, teach skills. That's what this is about. Check-in, check-out is about building relationships and teaching skills. But that building relationship piece is intentional, and you do it systematic. And you don't just go, oh, I think he's getting better. You're actually collecting data on, is he? Are you building that connection? Is the teacher's relationship? It's not this person, maybe mental health provider is part of this school behavior team, but it's not this person's decision to make the relationship with the, you're pushing it back that that teacher in the classroom is building that relationship with that child. That's the intention. And so I really continue to strive for that yes, our mental health providers are part of that team and helping make that decision, but that's building that whole system, not just mental health provider. The only thing I'm gonna say about this is just a couple examples if you haven't used it, but the words you use here on scoring matter for kids. Just gonna say that. You need kids' words. You need what matters to them. If okay is not, or needs work is a trigger, don't use needs work. Use not yet. That's my new favorite. Not yet is my favorite, because just because we're not yet there doesn't mean we're not gonna get there, right? And so I love the 0 not yet as like instead of a yes or no, or the smiley face or frowny face, you know. So teaching kids those skills on self-management. Like, it's not just about how somebody else says I'm doing, but how I'm paying attention to that skill in myself. And so self-management is like underutilized in schools, and that check-in, check-out helps build that gap. We also started using our bhworks platform for what we called our school-based health providers. At the time we were building it, it was for our health resource advocates. And we had a bunch of them, of social workers and nurses, and it was going great. They just got started in February, and then we came back from spring break and heard, bye-bye, HRA. So again, we just said we're gonna continue to do the good where we can do the good. I just added a brand new user ID I was literally like, should we consider pulling this back out? And then I had a school say, hey, my school counselor is doing some stuff, and we want her to use it for indirect service. Can we track her indirect service? Yes, you can. And so I just put a new one in there for her. So this was back when there was nurses in the system doing some of the support. But primary referral reason for the SBH program, which was separate from our 31N, was not specified, so we weren't there yet. And then the second one is other. But then trauma and conflict with others, poor impulse control. So they were able to start putting some things. But for primary referral reason, why they started putting them on their caseload, triage was like a common one because we had some nurses doing it. So again, that was just something that I was able to quickly pull to show you guys how it can be used outside of 31N. Small group interventions, this is just our bhworks platform numbers, 39 small groups. We have 12 providers. And this, I think, was over the last 2 years. 141 students, so that was approximately 3 to 4 students per group. These are the topics of the group, or like the goals. And these were some of the names. My favorite, cute, friendly chameleons. How cute is that? Or inside out feelings. You can tell the like elementary school names from the high school names. They're like, we don't want anything corny. Can we just be called self-control? Sure. So anyways, that's part of the fun. And then the individual screening and student plans as we start building into that tier 3 support too, that we can pull out how students are doing on the GAD. So how many general anxiety disorder scales did we do? And this, I just give you a snippet from July, October to January, so you can see each of the month. This is how many were done in our ISD, and then what were they rated at. So as you can see, mild to moderate took up the most here.
And you could pull that under reports?
Yeah, yep. If you don't have access to it, you have to ask for it, but then they just magic wand it, and then all of a sudden you have it. So that's great. So this is good. Here's the PHQ, so how many per month. And then, and October was high, remember, because we were doing those universal screeners, pull that small group, do additional screener, also the referrals in the fall. And then here how they rated in general. And so the thing that I was sharing with my providers is we can start comparing this fall to spring, because everybody redoes them usually before the summer. So we can start comparing some of this. And the thing that we talk to teachers about is that we're constantly talking about building those skills up in kids. The number one way I got buy-in in a high school, because I'll have providers say, oh, the teachers don't want me to pull them, during class. And I said, well, go to the staff meeting and talk about the improved grades, the increased attendance, the decreased problem behaviors of the kids on your caseload in the last year. And so I actually tracked that as a provider and showed it at a staff meeting, de-identified. I mean, some of the teachers knew who they were. They were like, well, this was so-and-so, but I took the data away. But just to give them an idea, but what it did is it made sense. Like, it is worth it for him to go down and work with the mental health provider when his grades went from almost all failing to he's still getting D's, but he is passing, he's getting his credits, he's on track to graduate, right? That's the part that matters. So, like, don't just assume that this is just, oh, those irresponsible kids. It's our job to teach even these skills. And so how can we help all work together to build these skills? So as we start looking more and more into tier 3, the thing that I liked is that we can start really looking at how many of our referrals are for crisis responses, and then not only how many referrals, and I didn't even put it in here because it's so new, but a handful of us went and got additionally trained with the collaborative assessment for measuring suicide, managing suicide, CAMS, and the whole documentation system is in bhworks, and it is so well done. Like, I've used it already since I went through the training a couple weeks ago, and it's just really nice to be able to have it right there, and it says, are you on number 2 or number 3 of having that low risk of an interim session? It's just really nice. And then we can look at our individual interventions, and then also what kind of collaboration we're doing outside. So this is our number of referrals. It's similar to the one I showed you earlier about the behaviors, the screening outcomes. But again, I wanted to mention that we really use this data to drive programming forward. So we really, we have a couple of our providers does for mental health first aid, for youth first aid. And so we'll be like, hey, did you see your numbers? we are offering this training. Do you have a group of teachers, or do you want them to do it at your school? And we actually had a district that actually did say, yes, bring them in and do it for my whole staff. So that was kind of cool, using the data. Because when you can show the data, then they're more apt to be like, okay, I think we need to listen to what you're saying. Individual sessions, this is across 1 year. This is just individual sessions versus service type, not specified. We're working towards some of this stuff. And then group therapy, then case management. So we can show them, but this is where we're getting to now. Like at first it was like, when is the parent consent due? When is like all that technical? And now we're able to step back, and similar to the 2.0 thing, like we're able to say like, okay, but what are we making impact on kids and districts? Like how are we doing this, on what kind of sessions we're doing? This is also case note services. So how many we're doing CBT or behavioral skills training or social skills or whatever. It breaks it down. So a lot of them weren't using some of those. So we're hoping as we move forward that we can start saying, look, part of our charge is using evidence-based practices. I understand if you might document it in your narrative of your note, but most of you are not. So could you just check one of those boxes to show you're using some type of evidence-based practice during your intervention, and then we can track it that way. And so that's as we're moving forward. Again, data is what's telling the real story. Those individual stories are what make an impact. That individual story that shares across all the tiers that we're all doing the good work. You know, one of the CAMS trainings, or one of the CAMS interventions I did on a student, 16-year-old, at the very end, one of the last questions is if I had a magic wand, what could I do to help you? And it was stable housing. At 16, she had moved all over the district. And she was going into her junior year. She has 0.75 credits. I want somewhere to live, that I can get an education. And so I was like, whoop, back up, we need more on your team. And so the admin and the special ed person came in, the coordinator, and we all came together to say, how can we help you? Because then it became more about, they didn't know about how I got the information from her, but what they saw was, we have a team of people around this girl, we need to support her. It's, you know, yeah, she's tier 3, but the support she needs are down here. This is basic needs. And we have people that can help with basic needs. And so connecting that based on individual students' lives is so important. So how are we impacting those individual lives is where we're looking at all the time. Not just the data, but the stories behind the data is so important. And, you know, I mean, when I was thinking about it, it's like, how do you measure your own growth, right? How do you measure your own growth? Is there a number to it, or is it the story behind the numbers? So always just, even though I threw a lot of numbers and I love the numbers, I don't ever want to forget the stories behind the numbers. So hopefully we know that. Case management, you can also pull that. You can pull that data, that's great. We started building this out. This was super cool. Our local prevention and recovery team decided to do an app. It was primarily to get people with substance abuse to rides for treatment, is what the money came from. But we have our own, if you click on mental health and you click on school mental health, you can click on what school and it shows you what provider to get to. So our officers know about that. So if they're in the home and they're like, hey, when you go back to school, you can look for your mental, you know, they go download the app, check the app. Oh, it's Tessa, get a hold of Tessa or whoever. So again, if without those partnerships, that wouldn't have came to fruition. So, all right, I know we don't have a ton of time, but what is more clear and what is more, we have 5 more minutes. What is clear to you now, or maybe where do you have questions? What's still cloudy? Any clarifying or any like deeper digs that you want to? Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I imagine that would be harder. You know, when my supervisor, Jill Ball, started, she was going to contract with CMH. She had all of it written up and everything. And then she was like, oh, that seems like, you know, I'm going to just throw it out there. And then when I interviewed and then the other person interviewed, we were like, who's going to get it? And I was like, oh, a new grad, they're going to want a lot less money. They're going to get it. And Jill was like, no, we're going to hire both of you. I just got it approved. I was like, oh, good. And so her and I work together really closely. I am a big picture thinker. That's just how my brain works. I like get up on that balcony and look down and say, this is how this could be. And one of the visions that her and I were able to verbalize was we need to grow our number of providers in our area and show value to the districts. We're so embedded, our MOUs, like, you know, if they want additional, they pay a higher amount, right? But we're so embedded and there's such value of us in their district that I don't think they would ever want to go without at this point. I mean, you know, again, like I said to start this, you know, we're going to continue to do the good where we can, and if there's a roadblock, we'll back up and find that way around, because this stuff is too important. It's not going anywhere. Kids need support. Kids need to learn skills. Kids need to build relationships at school. So just continuing to find that path. And if you have outside providers, you know, I know they don't have to follow all of it. I don't know how that works. Maybe your MOU, you know, the checklist that the coordinators did, kudos. We plan on using that to beef up ours this summer into next year, because there was some things that I was like, ooh, we need to leverage some of this. I believe it was, what is your first name again? Sarah was telling me earlier they're going to use it and build like a 3-year out plan where it's like, we know we can't expect all this right now. And I love that concept too. Like, here's what we're doing now. Here's what's in our MOU. Next year we're going to add this. And then, and again, it builds that accountability, and it builds that we're in this together. This is not just what the mental health providers are doing for this tier 3 students. This is about how we're all working and building our roles and responsibilities forward to support kids. So, anything else? Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And as we're kind of working through, I'm just processing, did it all roll out, kind of like we'll plug in our provider in the tier of intervention with the support that makes sense, sort of the structure that you already built? Was there similar work happening everywhere, or did you really have like
So,
feast or famine?
yes. So I'm going to say this is like the best of trying to get our people moving forward, right? What I always explain it, and I've been in lots of districts across lots of ISDs, I always say it's like a different dance. Some have a line dance going, some have like waltzing and very structured dances, and some are like hip hop freestyle, right? And so that's how I've always, like, I have to go in and learn the dance moves. We have one district that's still not doing universal screening. They're not in that data. They're just not. And so we have to meet them where they're at. We do have a very strong MTSS team as well. So I sit with that leadership team as well to try to help bridge that gap and see where we need to grow. But we did have all but one, so 8 out of 9 use that universal screening and are doing some type of SEL curriculum. Is it all to fidelity? No. But again, we're meeting them where they're at. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys.